Okay. Hello, my name is Janet Shreeve. I'm the director of Shreeve Care Services, and this is my podcast, You Care, I Care, talking to different people with different experiences of the care sector. I am delighted today to be talking to Benson from 277. Is that correct?
It is correct. Nice to meet you, Janet.
Really nice to see you. And we've been trying to do this for a little while, I think.
Yeah.
So we finally made it. And we met, about 6 months ago, and have had several conversations about where we can go and our backstories. So how did you set up 277? How did it start? Because you've had a really interesting journey to get here, haven't you?
It's been interesting. Yeah, I feel like I've crammed a lot into 46 years. It's nearly 47. But
I think we'll leave that one aside. Some of us are heading a lot further down the line than that.
Well, you've done even more. So I've got to catch up. But yeah, there's a personal connection to the company name. The journey to that point taught me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times along the journey, I wasn't ready to learn. So I didn't realize what I was picking up along the way. And it was down to a real difficult period in my life, 2017, 2018. It kind of got to a real crunch time for me because I wasn't looking after myself. I got to a point where I didn't really want to live anymore, and I wasn't accepting any help from the people that cared about me. And my solution to that was to just isolate, get away from everyone, and try and solve it on my own, which had been my life pattern, really. And I think the biggest problem, although it's proving useful now, was quite often I can solve things because I'm determined, I'm driven, I've been blessed with intelligence from genetics from my dad. So my CV of solving problems was good. So whenever a problem come up, I didn't feel like I needed help. I felt like I could muddle through.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of people like that, and I meet more people like that now that I'm more open and vulnerable about my story. And it doesn't make us weaker. It just means that if we use it well, it makes us stronger.
Absolutely. And also, I think going back to the care side, it helps people realise that care is not just delivering care, it's caring for yourself.
Yeah, it's a huge part of it. And now that's kind of an obsession of mine, is learning something every day. Audio books, podcasts, a mainstay in my life and my journey, but it's also a good way for me to measure where I'm at, because some days I'm very resentful about putting a podcast on that yesterday I was really enjoying, and it will kind of prod me the wrong way, and I laugh at myself and think, why do you feel like that today? Because yesterday you were really enjoying this. And it's a good chance to sort of reflect and realise that you're not performing as well as you should be in certain areas of what you believe are important. And that self-awareness is a superpower that I try and help others with. So coming out of that dark space 2018, I needed to do something different. That was obvious. When I got to a position that I could start working again, a good friend of mine, she said to me, when you set up a business next time, create something you can promote by being yourself. And that advice sticks with me, and I try and say that to other people as well. Because
that's a really, really good thing. That is absolutely right. Because if you're not yourself, how can you run a business?
Yeah, man, I managed to perform for a lot of other companies over the years. My background for a long time was the health and fitness sector. I was a young, flashy Essex boy, so I only wanted to be around the posh private health club side of things. I didn't want to work in leisure centres and stuff like that. I wanted to be around people that I thought I wanted to be like. And I met some good people, but I also surrounded myself with some people that hadn't quite worked life out themselves yet. And everything became very material, very status driven. And although it's a health and fitness sector, it is a sales business. You do have to fill these places with memberships. You do have to convince people that something overpriced is worth the money, and they could get the same thing up the road for a third of the price. So I got very good at sales. I got very good at leading sales teams. And to do that well in the commercial sector often requires you to sacrifice some of your principles.
Yeah.
And I was brought up by my mum and dad. I'm blessed to still have mum and dad around. Me and my sister were brought up with good principles. And I knew I wasn't living up to some of those principles. And that's the whole isolation piece that I mentioned, was me escaping, getting a telling off from my mum, or the look from my dad, or my sister frowning at me because they do things right. And I like to think I do now. So fast forward to setting up a company. I chose to go into the non-profit world first. I set up a CIC. I knew nothing about them. That was a bit of an attraction. but also it safeguarded me, I felt, from getting straight back into the commercial world after being off the grid for a while. So I set up an organisation called the Fitness Garden, and it was based in High Wycombe, and that involved negotiating a shopping unit that was empty.
Right.
It used to be Clinton Cards. So I tapped back into my commercial skills of negotiating and trying to get my own way in that sector, and got this shopping unit, 2 floors, beautiful place, needed some work, but managed to get it rent-free for a year and just pay the service charges, which were minimal, but they were quite hefty for someone who had nothing.
Yeah.
And at the time, I had no income. So some people I'd met along the way were interested in supporting that. So a friend, Layla, helped out. She was a yoga teacher looking to grow her business. She mucked in, was pulling things off walls and helping me paint. And I remember one particular Sunday, we were both in there doing ceiling tiles, and Layla's not particularly tall. So we were trying to do these ceiling tiles. We made a right hash of it. Claire got involved and also helped us rip things off walls and paint walls. Lewis, a good guy who had a charity in the area called Phoenix Warriors, he's still doing amazing work in Buckinghamshire. He got involved. He was a plasterer by trade, so he mucked in. And the community, basically, a community that I was new to, when I went and approached them and said, look, I'm trying to do this thing. And the concept was that we'd have a space that charities could use Monday to Friday for free. I wanted to turn it into an indoor garden, artificial grass downstairs and upstairs, and just make a place where people felt comfortable. There was no sort of specific way it had to be used. It was just a space. And on the weekends, I would run commercial activities, so yoga picnics, we would do sound baths, we would do pop-up events to generate the money to cover the service charge and earn me a little bit of income to start building a life again. So we did that, opened 10th of August 2019.
Right.
And then just as we got some momentum, we had the lockdown. We weren't completely kiboshed by that, because we had a partnership with local pupil referral units where young people in groups of 4, sometimes 5, but generally 4 was their policy, would come along. And these are young people that had been excluded from mainstream school, some permanently, some on a kind of respite for the teachers, really, to take them away for 12 weeks to see if we could change some behaviour for them to go back to mainstream. But small groups were still allowed during COVID, as long as we had all the procedures in place. Because it was seen as a vulnerable cohort, we were able to still support them, which was good. So we still managed to function. But then things got stricter for the school policies, and the shopping centre had to shut completely. And then we managed to keep it going for a little while after COVID, having been closed for a while. But as we're talking business, and there's people out there that will relate to this, we got hit with a bill from the landlords for the service charges for the period we weren't even allowed into the shopping centre, which wasn't small either, sort of over £7,000, which for a non-profit who hadn't been able to trade anyway.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, and every bit of funding we were getting in was allocated against a project that somebody had said, sounds a great idea, we'll fund you for that. So there wasn't any, it was a non-profit, there was no wiggle room, there was no surplus stacking up to pay that bill for a period that we hadn't even been open. So that dispute led to having to make a tough decision and close the space. And then started to do projects out and about. We had good relationships with partners. So we worked with young adults with autism. We worked with more young people in the community that were being criminally exploited and excluded from school. Often the other way around. So the pattern is nationally, excluded from school or suspended for a long period of time generally leads to criminal exploitation. A lot of these organised gangs are very, very on the ball with their recruitment processes, as any business would be. And they know where to find the right people. And generally, if young people are hanging around on the streets because they're not in school, that's when they're looking for them, not 9 o'clock at night when they're out and about. They're looking for them during the day because it generally means that they've got time with them, because parents are often, it's not always missing parents as well, by the way. I want to get this in while I've got an audience. One of the things that drives me mad now that I've seen behind the curtain of this world is social media groups where people are commenting, lock up the parents and stuff like that. Sometimes there's parents that have not done what they should be doing in the community and within the family setting, and it leads to these young people having no real example to look up to. But often the parents have got other young people. One of their children's been suspended because they're struggling with coping with mainstream school. They've still got to go to work. I know one family where the mum works for the NHS, the dad's got his own business. There's other young people in the family. They've got to keep a roof over their head. So their teenage boy that's suspended has got free reign of wherever during the day. And because there was a real shortage of alternative provisions to put this young person in, he's just out there. And then before you know it, you see posts up that this child's missing, and you see all that stuff going out and about on social media, missing kids. Most of the time, these missing kids are involved in something that's led them out of town. Not always bad, but sometimes it's leading that way. So that, as you can tell from that little burst there, became a bee in my bonnet that I really wanted to try and work on. And I've spent a lot of my community energy now learning about how we can support schools, because they're not to blame. They have to manage a process that's very difficult. And you can't have, as I say to the mentees I support, you can't keep being as disruptive as you are and expect to stay in class. But it's not fair for you to have nothing. So you need to start engaging a little bit so we can work out what we can give for you that works for you right now. But you've got to do your part. And a lot of them are responsive to that, which is why we're seeing success. It's how we grow that now to be able to support more young people, which then gets to the answer to what is 277. 277 is our commercial arm, which I got comfortable with going back into after a few years. We go out and do mental fitness and high performance coaching for businesses. And then we now use some of that funding that we get from them or income. It's a commercial business. We take some of that to support the young people that we've had referred to us in the community. And we evidence that back to our corporate partners, the young people that they're getting support from. Sometimes they'll do little videos for the corporate partner to say thank you. If that's not appropriate because of the situation, we get either the police, the social care team, youth justice, sometimes the schools, and occasionally the parents. Not often, to be honest, but sometimes we're lucky enough to have a good relationship with the parents as well. And they will feed back to our corporate partners to say thank you. So everyone understands how it's happening, because I feel that means everyone kind of gives each other a chance. When it's just government funding paying for a mentoring program, everyone expects the earth, and then the local authority pull that funding, and then they've gone from expecting the earth to getting nothing.
It's a gradual process, isn't it? And ongoing process as well, because you can't just solve the problem with one or maybe even a group of 5 mentoring sessions. That's not going to solve it.
No. And it's very much, again, I think there's an issue where I see within some of the mentoring models that are local authority funded, everybody in the office knows it's 6 sessions, but nobody tells the young person that until session 6. Right. And sometimes us grown-ups have got to be able to have some difficult conversations early on that turn from a difficult conversation to a useful conversation. Because if the young person understands that over these 6 sessions, we're going to try and find an exit route for you into something that allows you to carry on doing something you enjoy, that's great. But a lot of the time I'm seeing adults go and do these sessions and then have conversations in the background about how can we get funding for another 6. And the young person isn't aware unless they've been through it already, which a lot of them have by the time we see them. You're just hoodwinking them and then wondering why they don't trust adult professionals or adults in general. And a lot of them are very smart, not academically necessarily, because they haven't given the hours to it to be academically smart, but life smart. Some of these young people, I've met 10-year-old boys that I've mentored who are much more up to speed with how the world operates than a lot of the adults.
I think that's very common now, because actually it never ceases to amaze me how much more a 10-year-old child knows now than I think I did at that age. Because it's much more worldly now, isn't it? There's so much, obviously, with social media, etc. So where did the name come from, 277?
So when I went back, probably, I don't know the exact timelines for when I decided to set up the commercial business, but what I did know was that I felt very different to how I'd felt back in 2018. That moment when I decided I was going to give life another go, I was in a hospital in High Wycombe, and combination of events had led to me finally saying, you got to stop kidding yourself, BSing yourself. You've got to go and do the work here to get yourself right. and accept some support from people who might know a bit more than you, which is the most painful,
That is the
painful
hardest
part.
thing to do, is often accepting that support, isn't it?
Oh, it was horrific, but it's led to me loving learning from people now. I talk a lot, but I listen a lot more. That's why I've got plenty to say. So I looked back and I thought, well, I know the date that I went on self-destruct. I know the date I was in hospital, and I decided I'm going to go and give this a proper go. And I just went online and went on several different websites to work out how many days it was to make sure that I'd got it right. And it turned out to be 277 days that I had no purpose and was just adding no value to myself or society. And I decided that name is going to work for me. I had 277 tattooed on my shoulder with Roman numerals.
Really?
As a commitment to it. I'm not a tattoo person, but I've had a couple of tattoos now. One is my surname on my arm, because for a long time in business, I didn't use my African surname because people couldn't say it. And I felt that was disrespectful to my dad, because the family name should be something they're loud and proud about. And the fact that people couldn't say it shouldn't be a reason to not show it
Well,
off.
I think I did call you Benson, so I probably, I'm guilty of that too.
Well, it's Mioba is the surname.
Yeah.
So yeah, it means heavy rain and thunder, apparently.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But so I had
Never
that.
told me that before.
No, I haven't. So I had that tattooed on my arm, and I had the Roman numerals for 277 on my shoulder. And I decided to call the company 277 because not every day that I think about it, but on some days where I feel like the world's against me, and we all have them moments where we feel like, oh, what am I doing this for? It's just useful to have that number in the forefront. And every now and again, someone I get to know might ask me that question, and it again helps me remember there's a purpose to this. The community stuff's really easy, but when I'm going into a commercial sector, sometimes I feel like I'm selling out to go back out into that world. But I now know that money's not the problem, it's what you do with it that's the problem.
Absolutely.
And if I can go out and generate a decent income and stop wanting the things that Benson used to want in terms of watches and nights out and all that nonsense, and like nice things, like fragrances is my new thing.
I know.
Right,
Had
so,
that
yeah, we've had that
conversation
chat.
too.
So I like fragrances now, and I like to put myself in a position where I can go and treat myself sometimes. But it's not the be all and end all. Like, I don't. Like, if I'm not in a position to do that, then it doesn't happen. But I know I'm doing good when there is a chance to do good, and I just want to be able to fund more of our own projects. And I feel like if we can use our commercial partners to fund more community stuff, they've met their commercial social responsibility without community social responsibility, without having to allocate resources and staff, because we do the model for them. They just partner with us. But also I want to have some models in place that other people can just take and do in their own field. So we use professional mentors based on the fact they're professional people that understand business and have been through some life journey. And we get them to a point where they're safeguarding qualified, got some knowledge around criminal exploitation, and got the availability to be there for a young person. And then all of our mentors are professionals who've got their own businesses or work in roles with a bit of flexibility. And then they basically, they become that role model, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, we try and match them up best we can. Females support females. It's a straightforward thing. But if we've got a young man that's into music and wants to sort of become a record producer, I'm not the best person for them. But while we try and find the best person for them, I might support them initially. But we would together start looking out for opportunities to get in a studio, spend some time with someone. And then if that seems like there's a good connection, then I can talk to that person about doing some one-to-one support for the young person, paid work, not voluntary. And then we pay them, and we set it up like that. So it's got to be organic, it's got to be done right, but it's got to be a model that I can then say to someone in the art sector or the theatre world or the accountancy world or whatever it is, and care, and say, look, here's a model. If you want to set up a mentoring model for young people that are interested in your field, we've tried and tested it. We've found ways you can get funding. This is how we suggest you do it. And then maybe that will leave some sort of legacy long beyond me that people are using. And I don't need a kickback on it, because I just want to prove that there's a way to do it, and ultimately go back to local authorities, as we do often, where we get a little bit of funding from them, prove it works, and then go back and say, there you go, there's a model. I can't say that they always take.
No, and it is always difficult getting the funding and getting people to actually accept what you do, and in many cases understand what you do. Because I think that's often the hardest bit. People don't always want to even understand what you do, and I think that's the challenge you face, definitely.
Yeah, I think sometimes there's barriers up. People will feel like we've been here before. That whole coffee cup brigade where they'll sit there and say, yeah, we tried that. And it's like, no, you didn't, because I've done the research for 3-4 years and then we've created a model that's different. And I understand why it might look the same on paper, because a lot of these organisations only want to hear certain language. So you have to put mentor on a form. We don't call each other mentors when we're doing the work. We don't even call it work. We call our team coaches, and we connect.
I have the same thing with care. I absolutely hate the word service user, which is used for anybody, working with a local authority. They're all talked about service users. To me, they're clients or customers. They're people. I think service user is the most bland, unexciting. I think it's just a horrible term, really.
Yeah, I was a service user.
Exactly.
My mental health was bad. I was going to sessions and group sessions where, I remember, as you said it, I can remember going to reception and people saying, are you a service user? And I'd be like, well, I'm here for this session.
Yeah, exactly.
So I suppose I am.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a weird thing.
It's a weird terminology, isn't it, if you think about it?
Yeah, in a world that's so human connection focused. It's a bit of a weird term, but so I've got used to that, and I feel like, when you said sometimes people don't understand or don't want to understand, I definitely get, like, going back to young people support, and that's not all we do, but that's the area where I feel like we've become a little bit of a known brand, if you like,
and a very important one, I should say, because it's an area that I find people don't want to talk about.
Young people support. Yeah, I feel like people, like everything really, people will have an opinion, but there's a level of depth to get down to before you can really talk about it, right?
Exactly.
So the young people that I explained, I've got mentees who, if they were here with us now, they would comfortably sit there while I told them what they're doing is not right, and they would accept some of what they're doing is not right. We don't hold anything back. It's not all fluffy. I feel like sometimes people think that these young people come with us, spend time with us, and then they get an easy ride. It's not that at all. It's the opposite, right? So but what we have is a relationship where it's honest and comfortable, and these young people feel like they can try and explain to us why they're stealing a car, right? Now, no one's saying stealing a car is a good idea when you're a 14-year-old boy.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you're a 14-year-old boy that then shows me evidence on your phone of a 35-year-old man threatening to burn your family house down if you don't steal this car, then the scenario is very different.
Absolutely.
And if you then speak to the police, who you've got a good relationship, which we have in 5 different counties now, and they say they know the person who's threatening the young people, but they can't do anything about it because it's part of a bigger thing. But there's no evidence that he's ever burnt someone's house down, so we need to accept the risk isn't a real risk. To a 14-year-old boy, it is a real risk. So you're playing in this world which people, like you said, sometimes don't want to understand, that people like to watch the TV programs and feel part of it that way, but they don't want to accept it's on their doorstep.
No.
And Wiltshire is a county where we've got a lot more going on with young people than people see from driving through the villages and the towns. I won't name towns, but there's some towns that have got a lot going on that are very good politically at keeping it out the news, right?
Nobody wants to talk about it.
And that's not just a Wiltshire thing, but Buckinghamshire had a similar trend when we were doing a lot of stuff there. And then there's some areas of the country, I mentioned I'm doing a project in Birmingham later in October, and they're very aware. Because some bigger places you can't avoid it. There's certain pockets of Birmingham and West Midlands that people probably wouldn't realise it's so rife. But some of the bigger cities, it's expected. But we need to understand that some of the behaviours are being mirrored in very rural areas. And it's not just because of social media. It's because young people are easier to target in areas where people are naive to it or don't want to see it.
And often there's not a great deal for these children kids, whatever you want to call them, young people, to do? Where do they go? You know, so much has gone from what I remember. I mean, I remember my father used to show films at youth clubs, and youth clubs were very, that's what people did.
Yeah.
They went there and probably 3 or 4 nights a week. So they, I don't know, watched a film or they chatted or whatever they did. But I can remember both of my parents going and being very involved with that. That's a whole strata that's gone. There's very few places now that have youth clubs. So where do people go?
Yeah. And a thing I mentioned earlier, some of the social media groups where adults comment, and that's a great point that you've said there. And it is a case of that, but it's also, nobody by saying that is justifying some of the bad choices young people are making. But what we know as a fact, for anyone who's been around this sort of world doing youth work, and I'm only part-time in it, so I'm learning a lot still, but I've had some great people educate me over the years. He's quite a young man, early 30s, Gavin, who's based in Essex now. His organisation, Reach Every Generation, so I'll give him a shout out. He's amazing. But he ran the gang prevention training that I attended in High Wycombe in 2019. And I stayed close to him because I could just see that he had a lot to learn. I could learn a lot from him, and we became friends, and I've met up with him a few times over in Essex to see what he's doing. But he educated the room that day, and you had counsellors, senior police officers, prison officers, NHS workers, all sorts of people in this room. And he was educating them that one of the easiest ways to help people stay safe is for them to be missed when they're not attending something, right? So by them being on their PlayStation, Xbox, whatever, they're just doing something that's an alternative that's fun. Like, that's cool, right? So I used to play Star Wars figures on the floor with a Sabutio football for fun. I'd much rather have been out with my friends, right? So at no point did anyone go, he's all right, he's got his Star Wars figures and his Sabutio. I was fine for that hour or two that it was late at night before bed, but I'd rather be out socialising and being around people. And because I was involved with sports, mainly football, if I ever wasn't at football training, I would be missed. My coach, Errol, would say, I wonder why Benson's not been here for 2 weeks. And someone would ask the question. And a lot of the organised gangs target young people that are not missed. Right? One of their key areas that they target is young people that are released from professional football academies. Because as soon as they've been football 5 days a week, 6 days a week, and suddenly they're not in football, a lot of these young people, predominantly men at the moment, because they're the ones where the bigger carrot is dangled financially. The women's game's growing, so we'll have that same problem, unfortunately. But in the men's game, for a few years now, 15, 16-year-old boys whose identity is built around football because their parents and their friends put them all over social media for nothing else but their football. So their whole identity is football. And when a club decides they're not going to be a professional at their club, they're heartbroken. They can't show it because they're this big, strong athlete. And then there's people waiting in the wings for them to say, we can give you some status. We can give you some credibility. We can make you fast money while you get back into the football. And it's a really sad thing that these hawks are hanging around looking for these things. But care homes, bringing it closer to your world, Gavin again gave some statistics at that training about how many he'd found out. He asked the people in the room that should know how many care homes were in Buckinghamshire. People couldn't give an exact number for young people. He was able to find online the night before, while his wife was watching a TV show or film, he was able to find online where they were, when the phases were that they bring in new young people. So he would know if he was a member of an organised gang, when to hang around in that town near that care home and look out for new young people that look lost, and then start talking to them and getting to know them and take them to a chicken shop and buy them a bit of food. Then a few weeks later, they owe you because you bought them 5 meals in the chicken shop. So then you get them to do something for you. So there was people sat in that room that should know this stuff that were like, oh my God. Right. So there's a lot to learn, and it is scary, but the more we know about it, the more we can safeguard young people, and the more the families will be confident to have conversations. The answers are out there, but I feel like a lot of the answers are not being looked at by us adults because we dismiss things like TikTok, Snapchat as child's play. But there's a lot of big businesses running huge marketing campaigns for these things. But there's also a lot of learning to do if you put yourself where young people are at. whether that's virtually or
Yeah.
physically.
And I think also, I think actually that we're going to have to do another podcast about this because there's an awful lot of that we can talk about. But I think one of the other things that I always think is that, I mean, I actually have 6 grandchildren, 4 of whom, let me get this right. Yeah, 4 of whom are teenagers.
Right.
The 2 boys are very into football. One of my granddaughters is very into ballet and dancing, does huge amounts of that and various other things as well. But she's very, very, lots of clubs, lots of things. And my other granddaughter's sort of more into photography and cooking because of what she's doing with her GCSEs. The 2 younger ones, obviously, still at primary school. But it's interesting how much, football is their life. I mean, particularly for the boys, probably the girls less so, although Amelia's pretty much into her ballet.
Okay.
And it's really interesting how much time they spend with their football. And I mean, I think they're pretty good. One of them definitely, one of them plays for sort of Crystal Palace Juniors. And fundamentally, I think I've spoken to my daughter about the fact and spoken to them, look, great if you end up being a professional footballer, but look as well at the other things that are around football, not just kicking the ball. So they're starting to think a little bit like that. But also, I think, and I've seen this, and actually another friend of mine was commenting about this recently, it's always, you must go to university, you must go to university. That really is not the be-all and end-all. You can probably earn more money as a plumber or an electrician at the moment because people are forgetting things like that. Those are things that are always going to be needed. And I think it's encouraging young people to look outside what everybody thinks they should be looking at and giving them that choice, which I think is what you're helping people to do. And, I mean, I've huge admiration for what you do because I think, the more I listen to what you do, it's very, very undervalued.
Yeah, I think it's, as I said, it's an area that we're continuing to learn in. The outcomes we're seeing and the length of time that we're now starting to see people staying on a good path is what makes me feel like we're doing something right. The world changes quickly, so we need to keep adapting. But all of the good outcomes that we're seeing, whether that's commercially, which obviously is a huge part of it in terms of being able to grow the community, but both sides, commercial and community. We're working with a leadership team in a law firm of directors, which might start with a conversation about conflict resolution within their team. That then leads to, it's not really that, it's a cultural thing. So then we look at how people are coping under different pressures, whether that's the speed of things coming in and then they can't be their best self because their mental agility is not great, or whether it's people struggle when the monotony of doing the same thing often kicks in, which we've worked with care homes, and often the care team, that repetition, compliance is not necessarily what it says on the tin in the job role, because they were hoping to be able to do more human stuff.
Exactly.
So then they're losing a bit of that. So how do you keep them on top of things? In sports world, how do you keep someone on top of their game and being their best when they're not doing what they came for? They're having to do a different role within the group dynamic. All of those settings, and then working with schools and young people individually, the solutions come from helping people be creative. Some people just need the space to be, and they can do it. Some people need the encouragement and the know-how to be creative because they've never had the opportunity to be. But more people than not, give them some space to be creative, and they can be creative. And tell them there's no rules. Then how do they communicate that creativity with the people they need to communicate it with? So that's one of the biggest barriers we've seen. And we're now doing more work with young people that aren't involved in criminal exploitation and not at risk of criminal exploitation. But what they are at risk of is not being able to put their ideas out into the world because they lack the social skills and confidence to portray and articulate themselves. So that communicate, how do you communicate? Written word, verbally, visually, and then collaboration. Which again, once you've cracked the creation and you've communicated what you want to do, how do you become comfortable with trusting, collaborating, recognizing the right type of people and opportunities, as we are doing, to collaborate? Because really, there's there's people that are probably in similar contrasting roles to you and I that wouldn't see an opportunity to sit down and collaborate.
Absolutely.
Because they'd think, well, hang on, she's over there doing that and I'm over here doing
so what's the point?
Yeah, but the reality is, if you give it the chance,
it can work.
Ideas, we've ended up with too many ideas. but that's what can happen if you're open to it and you're just prepared to hear someone out and go, well, actually, and before we recorded this, you said, I'll introduce you to him.
Exactly.
Or we should think about that.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if you don't communicate,
you wouldn't know.
You'll never know.
No.
And if you haven't got those creative sort of juices flowing, you're missing out.
Absolutely.
So yeah, but the care sector, we didn't talk too much about the care sector, but I will just add very quickly the area of care where I really started to feel sad and not know what the answers were I was supporting twin boys and they were put into care and they were separated. And when I met them, they're 13 years old. They're now 15. I haven't spoken to them for a while. The funding ran out after a year. Tried to do what we could funding it ourselves, but with one being Liverpool, one being Wales, it was really hard to do what we needed to do. So I tried to find them alternative support in the areas they're in. And it was just really sad to see how they were passed between different departments of care, which I understand that because they were now through the courts with children in care. So that became a different team.
Yeah.
But some of the funding that was being spent on care staff to just be in the room and not being available for dedicated staff that could help develop these young people was a really sad sort of eye-opener. And then I talked to people like yourself and other people that know that world better. A lady called Liddell that really helps me with understanding that world. She's a really senior social worker, leads a team over in Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire previously. But I then realised, this is the norm. Like, these kids get moved around so much. They're not from those parts of the world. They're from sort of Buckinghamshire, and they've been moved separately to Liverpool, Wales. God knows where they are now, bless them. But they're just lost boys, teenage boys with no schooling.
No.
Neither of them in school, homeschooling, not working.
It's heartbreaking, actually, isn't it?
And then what, like, trying to get them a chance to actually have a proper go. And this situation is no fault of their own. And parents just fell on hard times, chose to make some bad choices, and these boys needed to be taken into care. And it's not really care, it's just kind of
existing
accommodation. And probably a good way to close it off as a thing that will be happening all over the country is one of the boys at one point, from spending a lot of time talking to him, it felt like he had 3-on-1 supervision at all times. And this is because he thought a good thing to do would be say that he was going to harm himself. So he climbed on a roof and said he was going to jump because he thought that would make them put him back with his brother. It didn't. It made them increase the care to 3-to-1 with 3 mental health nurses at all time at a bill of not far off, just over 100 grand a month, right?
Unbelievable.
And then that meant that he couldn't go anywhere. He wasn't allowed to go and do any social activities with other groups. I tried to find him some stuff through Everton Football Club, who do an amazing community programme, but it just wasn't going to work with 3 carers following him around. So he started to feel, and the conversations he was having, all he asked me was what it's going to be like in youth offenders. He'd never been in one, but that's all he'd ask me every time I saw him. And he'd started to think that actually if he went to a youth offenders, he'd be able to do some activities, he'd be able to do...
That's unbelievable.
He'd be able to cook, but that's where it felt to me, he never actually said it, but it felt to me like he was weighing up his options because he was in a 3-bedroom house on his own with 3 carers supervising him all day, every day, doing video calls with his brother. And he's thinking, well, I know in a youth offenders that I get to go to the gym, I get to cook, and how sad is that? If we're pushing them in that direction to go out and do something mad just so they get locked up.
That is horrendous.
Frightening. So I dread to think how often them thoughts are going through young people's heads because of where they're at. I don't know what the answer is. I wish I did. But the more people I meet like you, I feel like I'm going to find some answer somehow think global, act local is the thing I picked up from
Absolutely.
Robert Downey Jr. in lockdown.
Yeah. Well, Benson, thank you so much. Honestly, that's been one of the most fascinating conversations. I mean, it always is whenever I talk to you. So from a business perspective, how do people get hold of you? Where do we find you?
I've got a website for myself. It's not a vanity thing. It's just that I can direct traffic to the right projects then. So it's www.benson.coach. That tells you a little bit about my background and then the areas that we sort of pride ourselves on in the commercial world. And just know, obviously, from listening to this, that all of that leads to transparency and evidenced outcomes with the community. So anything you see on there that might fit for your organisation, we could talk about how we support someone locally or a school locally, or if you're happy for us to continue to support in other areas of the country through your partnership, then we do that also.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, www.benson.coach, COACH.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. My name is Janet Shreeve. My website is shrevecareservices.co.uk, and more than happy to talk with anybody who would wish to know more about the work that I do and the work that Benson does. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Janet.
You're very welcome.